And I'd like to start on the last point first, the point that was just made about the local authorities and how this is going to be implemented, because if you look at Ireland, it's quite unique. It's the highest home ownership in Europe at 80 to 85%. And the initial implementation of the tax, Phil Hogan has said, although we don't have the legislation yet, but there are indications that if you don't own your own home, you're not going to have to pay it. So if you're a council tenant or a tenant rent in private property, you're exempted. On the private property end of it, it's obvious the landlord will pass it on. He'll filter it through by raising the rent. On the council end of it, it's possible as well. There's a whole plethora of changes happening in council tenancy at the moment, and it's quite possible that they'll also factor the property tax in. But at 85% of home ownership, it's quite a big impact right across all of the communities, and it's very unusual to have that degree of home ownership. But the way, if you listen carefully to how Hogan is putting it, what he's actually saying is that this tax is to be collected by the local authorities, and it's to be used to fund essential services such as fire brigades, emergency services, parks and libraries. He has spelt these things out. And really what they're going to do when it comes down to council level is they'll use this as a big stick to beat people up with, that you're not playing your civic duty, and if we have to take a fire brigade out in Dublin, it's because these shit stirrers on the left are telling people not to pay their property tax. I can see it playing out already in the same way as they played out all these lies and threats to us in the bin tax campaign. So I think we have to go back all the time to the big picture, to the question of the bank bailout. How can we live in a society that is going to pour up to 85 billion into a black hole called the banking system, and then impose these austerity measures on its population and still not provide a solution, still lead us into deeper and deeper crises? And the point that was made from the floor, I think, by Ruth Coppinger, I think is very, very important, because there's a psychology goes with this. If you're a worker in this country since the collapse of the Celtic Tiger, you're probably short between €500 to €800 if you're on the average industrial wage to what you used to earn. And that's because involuntarily they took pension levy, employment levy, they upped your PRSI, and they came after you for the universal social charge. If you're unemployed, or you're disabled, or you're a carer, or you're a pensioner, they've also gone into your pocket and taken money out of it. So your income is down, the amount of money you have to spend is constantly decreasing. Here, for the first time, they're imposing austerity on us, which is voluntary. Now, what does that say to the psychology of the population? It means F off, you're not getting it off me, and I don't have it. And I can see that clearly written on people's faces. It's been the reaction in popular polls and text polls and in Vox Pops, etc. And I'm really delighted to see you here, Peggy, and I know that there'll be loads and loads of people from the bin tax campaign that'll get stuck into this. And I just want to spend a bit of time on going over the arguments that we're going to face about that, because we lost and because we failed to break through on it. We have networks of people where we had active bin tax campaigns. We have networks of 50, 60, 80 people who will distribute leaflets, who will come out with the arguments, who already articulate the arguments probably better than anyone in this room can, or any elected politician can, against why we shouldn't pay this charge. And we have to get back to those networks straight away and, if you like, re-energise them in terms of the arguments, in terms of the possibilities, and begin to pull them into the loop as the community-based campaign in the first place. And when people say to you, but Bridget, we didn't pay the bin tax and we lost, and it's true, they're about to privatise the bins in Dublin City Council in the next few weeks. I think they've already done it in most of the other local authorities. We lost, but we have to point out one thing. In areas like Ballyfermot, and I can speak very clearly about this, but I know it's true of Dublin West, it's true of Clondalkin, it's true of Drimnagh and Crumlin, the bin tax campaign reinvigorated the community. It was the first time in years and years of the Celtic Tiger, with partnership weighing down as a weight on top of us as workers, it was the first time in a long, long time that people got organised in their communities and felt that they were able to fight back, and did fight back. And nobody went to prison because they didn't pay. We went to prison because we engaged in civil disobedience and refused to recognise their injunctions. But the people who were being brought to court over non-payment were defended by the campaign, which had a membership base that you paid a €5 or a €6 into, which was then able to engage solicitors to defend them on legal stuff to do with EU and waste management law. Nobody went to prison because they didn't pay. They may have, ultimately lost some fines or whatever, but we have to remember that there are positive things, and the main thing is the way we organise the communities. I remember an old Communist Party head in Ballyfermot saying to me that when we had marches of 400, 500, 600 in Ballyfermot, regularly had marches, he said to me, this is the first time Ballyfermot has come alive since the 50s and 60s. Now, that's obviously because of the issue, and it ignited people, and I think this will do the same thing. And Phil Hogan talks about it as a modest fee, and everybody's made the point here today, and it's clear from the ERSRI predictions, it's not a modest fee. It's a flat tax. Flat taxes 300 years ago were declared stupid right across every society. It's a flat tax that is going to increase, and they're not making any secret of it. It's also very importantly linked to the question of water. And water is a global political issue now. They call it the new oil. And when they move to charge for a very essential commodity like water, very, very quickly they privatise it. We're linked in with a European-wide anti-privatisation campaign. There's some very, very good material. Anybody who gets involved in the campaign, I can get you the DVDs to show you what the privatisation has done in countries like Holland and France and Germany, and how already, through people power and pressure of environmental groups, some local authorities like Hamburg and Paris are beginning to take back control of the water because it doesn't work. You commodify something and put it into private hands, it becomes expensive, chaotic, dirty and inefficient. And that's the challenge I think we have, that we've got to both defend people who want to refuse because they're indignant. And the people of Spain led a mass mobilisation recently where they call themselves the indignant movement. And we feel indignant about something else that they're taking off us. They may praise us across Europe and say, look at the Irish, they're doing a great job, they're meeting their targets for the IMF, they're imposing the austerity unlike the Greeks and the Spaniards and the Italians. Look at the Irish, God help us, we're beaten back and we're beaten down, and this gives us a chance to help to regarner and remobilise people, despite the fact that we've lily-livered union leaders all over the place. So I think it's a very, very important meeting. It's a great turnout. It's a great start. Everybody's contributions are really welcome. And I do want to just reiterate one last point, and that is the question of the weakness of the other side. This morning, we went, about 10 of us, to lobby the local Labour TD, Michael Conaghan, over the question of SNA cuts. And 6 SNA parents went into his clinic and pinned him literally into a corner on the question of what the hell are you doing, elected by the people of this area on promises. One mother had downloaded the Labour Party information from the website, where in 2009, Kathleen Lynch, I think her name is, from Cork, Kathleen, whatever that woman, yeah, made the promise to the people of Ireland, we would not touch the SNAs. And now, in our area alone, every school is losing at least 2 or 3 SNAs. Parents and kids are all being dramatically affected. And they pinned him into a corner on his policies. Are you not going to stand up to Enda Kenny? Is the Labour Party not going to come and stand up for the people who voted them in, for the working people on the promises they made? And of course he asked them to death and said, you don't know the fights that go on in there, I'll do my best and all this sort of stuff. But they are weak. And they will feel the pressure in the estates if we make them feel it, because they are watching their back and watching their base, and it'd be very useful for us. And we often, Pat Dunn is there now, and we often split the Labour Party on the council on votes over crucial issues like housing, the privatisation of the bins and stuff like that. So we have to go after the jugular for the Labour Party, because they're supposed to represent our interests, and we have to go after their jugular. And the best way of doing it is the success of a mass non-payment campaign, knocking on doors, big meetings, mobilisations on the streets. And very finally, because I feel very passionate about this, the idea that we should see campaigns not linked, there's this campaign, there's that campaign, there's the other campaign, I think is wrong. I think we have to join the dots and bring it all back down to the question of the bailout and the IMF EU austerity package. And as somebody said earlier on, the slogan of cancel the debt, get this monkey off our backs and let us live our lives in a proper society. I think we have to keep banging on about that. So when we talk of mass mobilisations, anything that moves, next Wednesday at the Dáil, all of the protests. When the IMF come here, all of the protests. There was a meeting this morning to discuss an anti-budget protest later in December or November, whenever it's going to be. All of the protests. We want big banners about this issue on it. We want the people that were knocking on the doors, who are refusing to pay, who are organising in their communities, and we want to link the question of why are we being hit again, hit for water tax, hit for property tax, because you're pouring 85 billion into a black hole called the banks, and that is the obscenity, and that has to stop. Thanks very much.